Imagine. Imagine that time is a river, and we are floating along it, unable to stop, unable to go back. Every moment takes with it words, actions, decisions, people's fates. And it seems that all this disappears irretrievably in the stream of oblivion. But there are places on this earth where time seems to stop, where the past does not dissolve into nothingness, but is carefully preserved in a special silence. Hello, my dear listeners. In these quiet hours of the night, I invite you to come with me on a wonderful journey to a place where time seems to have stopped, where 8 centuries of human history rest in a special silence. Tonight, we will look behind the ancient walls of the Vatican to the place where the memory of all mankind is kept. Today, I want to tell you about one such place, a place that contains 800 years of uninterrupted human history, a place where in the semi-darkness of ancient halls lie millions of documents, witnesses of epics, wars and peace, love and betrayal, great discoveries and tragic mistakes. We will talk about the Vatican Apostolic Archives, what was once called secret. The word secret, how many riddles and speculations it generates in the human imagination. But let me dispel one illusion at once. When in the distant 1612, Pope Paul V decided to collect all the documents of the Roman Catholic Church in one place, he called this repository secretum, which in Latin means not secret, but separate, private. It was not a storehouse of state secrets, but the pontiff's personal archive, intended for his own needs and those of his cronies. Imagine a person who decided to collect the entire memory of his family in one place. Letters from grandfathers and great-grandfathers, birth and death records, records of important events. Only this family extended not over several generations, but over centuries, and concerned not just one family, but the entire Christian world. Paul V understood that documents are not just inked paper. They are frozen time, the voices of those who lived long before us, and whose thoughts, aspirations, fears, and hopes can help us understand ourselves. But the wisdom of Paul V was not only in collecting these documents. More importantly, he created a system for their preservation. At a time when fires destroyed entire libraries, when wars reduced priceless manuscripts to ashes, when human ignorance sent ancient thinkers to the fires, the creation of a centralized archive was an act of real insight. Think for a moment. What does it mean to preserve a document for 400 years? It means protecting it from fire and water, from mold and worms, from human stupidity and malice. It means creating a special atmosphere, a special climate, a special attitude to the past. Every document in an archive is not just a historical source, it is a connecting thread between generations, a bridge across the abyss of time. And here's the amazing thing. For almost 3 centuries, this archive really remained secret, in the sense that only a select few had access to it. But in 1881, a revolutionary event took place. Pope Leo XIII decided to open the archive to researchers. Imagine that moment when the doors that had been closed for centuries finally opened to scholars from all over the world. Why did Leo XIII take this step? Perhaps he realized that truth does not fear the light. Perhaps he realized that a church that hides its history looks weaker than a church that is ready to show the world the evidence of its past, with all its light and dark pages. Or perhaps he simply believed that knowledge is a good thing in itself, and that humanity has a right to its own memory. Since then, the Vatican Archives has become more than just a repository of church documents. It has become an international center of research, a place where scholars from all over the world, regardless of their religion, nationality, or political views, can touch the primary sources of history. And here we come to one of the most striking aspects of this place. The archive hosts about 1,300 scholars each year from more than 60 countries around the world. This is not just a number. It is a symbol that the memory of humanity belongs to the whole of humanity, not to individual states or denominations. To gain access to the archive, one has to prove one's academic qualifications, submit a diploma, and letters of recommendation. But no religious or ideological oaths are required. Catholic and atheist, Christian and Muslim, all are equal in the face of history. All have the right to seek the truth in these ancient documents. Just how much storage can a human institution hold? In the case of the Vatican Archives, the answer is a staggering 85 kilometers of shelving. Try to visualize this figure visually. 85 kilometers is the distance between Rome and the ancient Etruscan city of Tarquinia, or between Moscow and Sergiev Posad. If you decided to walk along all these racks, you would need a whole day. But it's not just about quantity. The archive is called the Archive of Archives. It contains some 650 separate fonds, each of which, by itself, could be the basis for a major research center. These include the records of the Roman Curia, the oldest departments of the Holy See, the records of 90 diplomatic missions around the world, and the complete archives of church councils, including the First and Second Vatican Councils. The personal and family archives deserve special attention. Take, for example, the Borghese Foundation, which contains about 2,000 volumes. The Borghese is not just an aristocratic family, but a whole epoch in the history of Italy and the whole of Europe. Their documents reflect political intrigues, cultural trends, economic processes of several centuries. Reading these papers, the researcher feels as if he is immersed in the living fabric of the past, where abstract historical processes take on human faces and concrete destinies. But how to navigate this ocean of documents? For this purpose, there are almost 4,700 research tools, catalogs, indexes, inventories. Among them, the real gem is the Scenario Garampi, a catalog of more than 800,000 cards collected in 125 volumes. It was created in the 18th century by Cardinal Giuseppe Garampi, a man of titanic diligence who devoted 21 years to the systematization of archival materials. Imagine this work: 21 years of life spent surrounded by dusty folios, among documents yellowed by time. Garampi was not just compiling a catalog, he was creating a key to human memory, a treasure map for future generations of researchers. Thanks to his work, today a scholar can find in a few hours a document that would have taken months to find without such an index. What treasures do these shelves conceal? Among the oldest documents is the Liber Diurnus Romanorum Pontificum, dating from the late 8th or early 9th century. It is a collection of formulas of the papal chancery, a kind of manual for official correspondence. It seems to be a dry administrative document, but for the historian, it is invaluable. It allows him to understand how the state apparatus of medieval Rome worked, what issues were considered important, what language was used to communicate with various correspondents. Even more impressive is the diploma of Emperor Otto I from 962, written in gold letters on purple parchment. This is not just a document. It is a work of art, a symbol of power and greatness. The purple color in the Middle Ages was the prerogative of emperors, and the golden letters emphasized the exceptional importance of the message. The very fact that this document has been preserved for over 1,000 years seems like a miracle. But the archive holds more than just official documents. Here you can find letters from people who shaped the course of European history and culture. A 1702 address by Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz, in which the great philosopher and mathematician called the papal archive, to a certain extent, the common archive of Europe. What foresight in those words! Leibniz understood that for centuries, the Church was not just a religious institution, but also a center of education, diplomacy, and culture. Its archives had indeed become a mirror of European civilization, or Voltaire's letter to Pope Benedict XIV from 1745. Irony of history. All of Voltaire's works were later included in the Index of Banned Books, but his letter was carefully preserved in the papal archives. Is this not a symbol that true wisdom lies in the ability to preserve even what one does not agree with? A special place in the archive is occupied by documents related to Russia. And here opens an amazing panorama of Russian-Vatican relations, stretching for centuries. The message of Pope Honorius III from 1216 to 1227, with an appeal to convert Russians to the Catholic faith, is a document reflecting medieval ideas about religious unity as the basis of political peace. Pope Leo XIII's correspondence with Tsar Alexander III and Grand Duke Vladimir Alexandrovich Romanov opens a page of 19th century diplomatic relations, when the two great powers sought common ground despite religious differences. A letter from Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich to Pope Clement X in 1672 about the project of the League of European Sovereigns against Turkey shows how a common threat could bring even ideological opponents closer together. But perhaps the most striking document is Ivan the Terrible's address to Gregory XIII of 1580. Ivan the Terrible, that dark and mysterious ruler, sought an alliance with Rome against common enemies. What thoughts, what calculations were behind this letter? What was the king pondering about as he dictated these lines? The document remains, but the mystery of the human soul that created it still stirs the imagination of historians. The time of troubles is also reflected in the Vatican archives. The letters of Boris Godunov, False Dmitry Bushwurst, Marina Meneshek. These documents allow us to look at one of the most dramatic epochs of Russian history through the eyes of its direct participants. Here, history ceases to be an abstraction and takes on a human face, with its passions, misconceptions, and hopes. Patriarch Tikhon's 1921 letter to Pope Benedict XV, asking for help for the Russian people suffering from famine, is particularly moving. It was a cry for help across all religious and political barriers, a plea from one Christian to another to save the dying people. And help was forthcoming. Benedict XV launched a Catholic relief campaign, which Pius XI turned into the pontifical mission. But the archive does not only preserve high diplomacy. Here you can also find curiosities that reflect the spirit of the times. For example, an anonymous note from 1933 about the Soviet Post Office's desire to issue a series of 8 anti-religious stamps. This event caused real excitement in the Roman Curia and the diplomatic world. Today, it may seem like a trifle, but back then, every symbolic gesture was seen as a manifestation of great politics. The archive also witnessed one of the most significant events of the 20th century, the Second Vatican Council. Observers of other religions, including Archpriest Vitaly Borovoy from the Russian Orthodox Church, took part in its work. It was a breakthrough in interfaith dialogue, an attempt to overcome centuries of mutual misunderstanding and hostility. It also contains Michelangelo's letters, testimony to the creative anguish of a genius, his reflections on art and faith. Henry VIII's letter requesting an annulment, a document that changed the course of English and European history. The Dictate of the Pope, a manifesto of medieval theocracy. Each of these documents is not just a historical relic, but a window into an era, a key to understanding how people of the past saw the world and their place in it. The work of Italian paleographer Barbara Frail deserves special mention. Her discoveries show how modern science can shed new light on ancient documents. Her discovery of an authentic copy of the Chinon parchment in 2001 provided new insights into the history of the Templar order and their relationship with the papacy. And her research on the Shroud of Turin, in which she claimed to have discovered evidence of the burial of Jesus of Nazareth, shows how archival documents can complement and clarify other historical sources. But the Vatican Archives is more than just a repository of the past. It is a place where the past meets the present, where ancient documents help to understand contemporary issues. This was particularly evident in the debate over the role of Pope Pius XII in the Second World War. 2nd of March 2020 was a date of historic importance. The Vatican opened access to its World War II archives. This decision was not an easy one, for it signaled a willingness to subject the actions of the Church's leadership during one of the most tragic eras of humanity to the judgment of history. Pius XII is one of the most controversial figures in the history of the papacy. Some see him as a wise politician who saved thousands of lives by acting behind the scenes. Others accuse him of silence in the face of the Holocaust. The opening of the archives should have brought clarity to these debates, and the results of the research were mixed. German historian Hubert Wolff's team found evidence that Pius XII did know about the mass murder of Jews from his own sources, but withheld this information from the US government. Documents were discovered that were apparently excluded from official publications to protect the Pope's image. Particularly painful was Angelo Della Acqua's note warning not to believe Jewish accounts, because Jews easily exaggerate, and Orientals are not really examples of honesty. The document, the researchers said, is clearly anti-Semitic and shows why Pius XII did not speak out against the Holocaust. But history, as always, proved more complicated than simple assessments. During the war, the Catholic Church hid some 4,000 Jews in its Roman institutions. These were concrete lives saved, concrete displays of humanity in an inhuman time. Researchers are also interested in the so-called rat trails, routes organized by members of the high clergy for the escape of Nazi war criminals to South America after the war. If these allegations are confirmed, it will be another dark page in the Church's history. The process of beatification of Pius XII was suspended until the archives were fully opened. This is a wise decision. Holiness cannot be based on hiding the truth. If the Church is truly committed to purification, it must be prepared to face the truth, however painful it may be. The opening of wartime archives is a manifestation of the broader trend towards transparency that characterizes the modern Church. In an age when information spreads instantaneously, when secrets are increasingly difficult to keep, the only way to maintain trust is through full openness. But the archive holds not only documents from the last centuries, it holds manuscripts that are 1,500 years old and more. And today, these ancient scrolls are getting a new life thanks to the process of digitization. The project to fully digitize the Vatican Apostolic Library will last 9 years and will preserve some 40 million pages in digital copies. Among them are about 80,000 rare manuscripts and 8,900 incunabula, books printed before 1501. Imagine the works of Homer, Sophocles, Plato, and Hippocrates, transcribed by the hand of medieval monks, will become available to anyone with access to the internet. One of the oldest surviving Jewish codices, the Sifri, the Vatican Codex, these treasures of human thought, will no longer be the property of only a narrow circle of specialists. Digitization is not just a technical procedure. It is an attempt to defeat time, to make knowledge immortal. A digital copy will not replace the original with its special aura, its physical connection to the past. But it can ensure the safety of information in case of disaster. It can make knowledge available to all mankind. We live in an era of information abundance, when more data is created every day than mankind has produced in its entire previous history. But quantity does not automatically translate into quality. Information does not equal knowledge, and knowledge does not equal wisdom. In this context, the Vatican Archives takes on a special significance as a place where time-honored human wisdom is stored. Of course, the archive is not free from myths and legends. The human imagination cannot accept the idea that the Vatican dungeons contain only documents. It populates these halls with fantastic artifacts. The chronovisor, capable of showing events of the past, the menorah from the Temple of Jerusalem, the Holy Grail, evidence of contact with aliens. These myths are understandable. They reflect the human need for wonder, for mystery, for that which transcends the ordinary. But the true miracle of the Vatican archives is not in the mythical artifacts, but in what is actually stored here: the voices of the past, the evidence of human experience, the unbroken chain of memory that links us to our ancestors. Every document in an archive is a human endeavor to leave a trace in history, to pass on something important to future generations. A letter from a king or a simple monk, a diplomatic note or a personal diary are all manifestations of the same aspiration: the desire to be understood, the desire for life to have meaning, for suffering and joy not to disappear without a trace. There are theories according to which the entire early history of Christianity is a fiction, that the Vatican is hiding the true history of the Church. These theories reflect a distrust of official versions of history, a desire to find the hidden truth behind the facade of official accounts. But they also reflect a misunderstanding of how historical science works. History is not a set of final truths, but a process of constant reinterpretation of the past in the light of new data. Each generation of historians sees the past from its own angle, asks its own questions, and finds new meanings in it. The Vatican Archive's openness to researchers is a contribution to this process, an opportunity for the scientific community to verify, clarify, and revise established ideas. In the 16th century, during the Reformation, when Reformed priests were burning Catholic scriptures and church archives en masse, the Vatican decided to save church archives and books from total destruction. It was a wise decision to preserve the documents of not only its supporters, but also its opponents. Not only that, which confirms the official position, but also that which challenges it. Allegations that since the 17th century, the Vatican has set up secret groups to seize and hide all documents compromising church dogma reflect the notion that truth can be monopolized by a single organization. But truth is not afraid of the light. It may be distorted, it may be silenced, but eventually it finds a way to break through. The current policy of openness in the Vatican archives is a recognition that the Church is stronger when it is not afraid of the truth about its past. It is an understanding that authority cannot be based on the concealment of facts, but must be built on a willingness to learn from the mistakes of the past. When I think of the Vatican archives, I imagine not just a repository of documents, but a kind of temple of human memory. Here, in the semi-darkness of the ancient halls, between the rows of shelves, time flows in a special way. The past is not dead here. It lives on in every document, in every line, written by the hand of a long-dead person. Imagine a 13th century monk bent over a parchment by candlelight. His hand writes the letters. His thoughts flow into words. His soul is imprinted on the paper. Centuries pass. The monk has long since decayed in the ground, but his words continue to live. And today, in the 21st century, a researcher can touch this document and feel a connection with a man who lived 800 years ago. This connection of time, this continuity of human experience, is what makes the Vatican archives a special place. It is not just information that is preserved here, but the very fabric of human history with all its threads, golden and black, strong and torn. About 1,300 scientists come here every year from all over the world. Each of them is looking for answers to their own questions. Each of them is trying to understand something important about the past. An American historian studies documents about the Crusades. A German researcher delves into materials about the 30 Years' War. A Russian scientist analyses the correspondence between the Russian czars and the popes. And in this diversity of research interests, the universal value of the archive is evident. It belongs not only to the Catholic Church, not only to the Christian world, but to all of humanity. Because the history it preserves is the history of all of us, regardless of nationality, religion, or political beliefs. The requirements for access to the archive are strict but fair. You need to prove your academic qualifications, submit letters of recommendation, and clearly articulate the goals of your research. These requirements are not an obstacle, but a guarantee that invaluable documents will fall into the hands of people who can understand and interpret them correctly. After all, working with historical documents is not just reading. It requires special knowledge, paleography, the ability to read ancient handwriting, diplomatics, the science of document authenticity, knowledge of Latin and other ancient languages, and understanding of historical context. A document without context is a riddle without a key. 85 kilometers of shelving. When I try to imagine this amount of information, I get a special feeling. This is not just a large library. It is a concentrated memory of mankind. Here is a concentration of evidence of the most important events in European and world history over 8 centuries. Think about it. Every meter of these shelves contains dozens or even hundreds of documents. Each document is someone's life, someone's thoughts, someone's decisions. Multiply that by 85,000 meters, and you get an idea of the wealth of human experience that is preserved here. The archives are divided into different collections, each of which reflects a particular aspect of the Church's work or a particular period of history. The archives of the Roman Curia hold the documents of the oldest departments of the Holy See, the Chancery, the Apostolic Chamber, and the congregations of cardinals. It is an administrative machine that for centuries managed not only church affairs, but also participated in major European politics. The archives of the Pontiff's missions to the world are a record of the Vatican's diplomatic activity. More than 90 diplomatic missions around the world, and each has its own correspondence, its own negotiations, its own work in defense of the interests of the Catholic Church. These documents are constantly being added to. History continues, and the archive continues to grow. The archives of councils and synods are of particular interest. The First and Second Vatican Councils and most of the documents of the Tridentine Council are materials about how church doctrine was formed and how decisions were made that determined the development of Christianity for centuries to come. The archives of religious orders open another page of history. The Jesuits, the Dominicans, the Order of Penance. Each of them had its own specificity, its own history, its own contribution to the development of the Church and society. By studying their documents, one can understand how the Church adapted to changing conditions, how it responded to the challenges of the time. Personal and family archives add a human dimension to this grand historical panorama. The Borghese Foundation, with its 2,000 volumes, is not just the records of one family, but a cross-section of aristocratic culture from several eras. Here one can find material on the patronage of the arts, on political intrigue, on the daily life of high society. Mixed holdings contain collections of documents of various origins, grouped thematically. These collections often prove to be real treasure troves for researchers, as they make it possible to see connections between events and people that at first glance seem unrelated to each other. Storing such a large number of documents requires special conditions. The archive is housed in 6 different rooms, each with its own specificity. Il piano nobile, le salle Chigian, gli scaffali in ferro, I soffitoni, I depositi sotterranei, or bunker, le sale climatizzate. Each name speaks for itself. The noble floor, the room of the Chigi family, iron shelving, rooms with high ceilings, underground vaults, climatized rooms. Maintaining optimal storage conditions is a constant concern for archivists. Temperature, humidity, lighting, everything must be under control. After all, Documents that have survived centuries can be destroyed in a few days of mishandling. 4,700 research tools are another manifestation of how seriously the Vatican takes the systematization of its riches. Scudario Garampi is only one, albeit the most impressive, of these tools. 800,000 cards, 21 years of work by Cardinal Garampi, is a feat comparable to the creation of a great work of art. But Garampi was not the only one who devoted his life to systematizing archival materials. Generations of archivists, librarians, and researchers have worked to make these treasures accessible. Their names are little known to the general public, but their work is invaluable to anyone interested in history. Among the documents in the archive are some that can be called icons of history. The Liber Diurnus Romanorum Pontificum is not just an administrative compendium, but a testament to how the medieval church saw its role in the world. The Diploma of Emperor Otto Führer is a document of an era when secular and spiritual authority were closely intertwined. The letters of Leibniz and Voltaire show how the intellectual elite of Europe viewed the papacy in different eras. Leibniz saw the Vatican as the center of European culture, Voltaire as a stronghold of obscurantism. But both saw the need to engage in dialogue with Rome, which is significant in itself. Documents related to Russia deserve special consideration. They show how relations between the two Christian centers of Rome and Moscow developed. These relations were never simple. Religious differences, political interests, and cultural differences all created a complex picture of interaction. Pope Honorius III's message, calling for the conversion of Russians to the Catholic faith, reflects medieval notions of religious unity as the basis of political order. At that time, the differences between Orthodoxy and Catholicism were not perceived as different traditions within Christianity, but as an obstacle to true unity. 19th century correspondence between popes and Russian emperors shows attempts to find a common language in a changed world. Religious differences remained, but there was an understanding of the need for cooperation in solving common problems. Patriarch Tikhon's letter asking for help for the starving Russian people is particularly touching. There is no politics, no diplomacy, only human compassion, and the belief that Christian solidarity is stronger than political differences. The documents of the time of troubles, letters of Boris Godunov, false Dmitry I, Marina Manischek, open one of the most dramatic pages of Russian history. Here, political intrigues are intertwined with personal dramas. Big history is manifested through the fates of specific people. An anonymous note about Soviet anti-religious stamps may seem like a small thing, but it reflects an important feature of the 20th century, a time when symbols became particularly important. Every gesture Every image was perceived as a political statement. Archpriest Vitaly Borovoy's participation in the Second Vatican Council is a symbol of hope for overcoming centuries-old differences. The dialogue between the churches has begun, and the archive documents record its first steps. Michelangelo's letters add a cultural dimension to this historical mosaic. The great artist was not only a creator, but also a man of his time, and his correspondence reflects the spiritual life of the Renaissance. Henry VIII's letter of annulment is a document that changed the course of English history. The Pope's refusal to grant this request led to England's break with Rome, the establishment of the Anglican Church, and the religious wars that plagued Europe for centuries. The dictate of the Pope is a manifesto of papal authority in its most ambitious expression. This document reflects medieval ideas about the divine origin of papal authority and its superiority over secular rulers. Barbara Fraill's work shows how modern science can extract new knowledge from ancient documents. Her discovery of the Chinon parchment shed new light on the history of the Templars, showing that even well-researched questions can have unexpected twists and turns. Her research on the Shroud of Turin demonstrates how archival documents can complement data from other sciences. Written sources help interpret physical evidence and provide a context for understanding enigmatic artifacts. The debate surrounding the role of Pius XIII in World War II shows how an archive can be a site of painful revision of historical assessments. The discovery of wartime documents took courage, a willingness to learn the truth, however unpleasant it might be. The research of Hubert Wolff and his team has uncovered documents that challenge traditional assumptions about the role of Pius XII. Angelo Della Acqua's note, with its anti-Semitic remarks, shows that even in the highest echelons of church power, there were prejudices that could influence decision-making. But history, as always, turns out to be more complicated than simple assessments. 4,000 Jews saved are concrete lives, concrete expressions of humanity. Perhaps Pius XII could have done more, but what he did also matters. The question of rat trails remains open. If they did exist, it would be yet another indication of how difficult it is to navigate morally in the chaos of war, how difficult it is to distinguish mercy from complicity with evil. Suspending the beatification of Pius XII until the archives are fully examined is a wise decision. Holiness cannot be based on hiding the truth. If the Church is truly committed to moral purification, it must be prepared to look honestly at its past. The Vatican Library Digitization Project is an attempt to make the treasures of human culture available to the world. 40 million pages, 9 years of work. The scale of the project is impressive, but even more impressive is its significance for the future of humanity. Imagine Homer's works, transcribed in medieval scriptoria, will be available to a school child in a remote African village. Plato's manuscripts will be available to students in Asia and America. The ancient medical treatises of Hippocrates will be available to modern doctors. Digitization is not just a technical procedure. It is the democratization of knowledge, the breaking down of barriers between the elite and the masses, between developed and developing countries, between the present and the past. Of course, a digital copy cannot fully replace the original. The tactile sensations of touching ancient parchment, the smell of old books, the special aura of a place, all this is lost in digitization. But in return, we get the opportunity to preserve information forever, to make it available to millions of people. 80,000 rare manuscripts, 8,900 incunabula. Each of these documents is unique. Each tells its own story. Incunabula, books printed before 1501, are witnesses to a revolution that changed the world. The invention of book printing by Gutenberg made knowledge widespread, accelerated the spread of ideas, and paved the way for the Reformation, the Renaissance, and the scientific revolution. One of the oldest surviving Jewish codices, the Sifri, is a bridge between worlds, between Jewish and Christian traditions. The Vatican Codex, one of the oldest manuscripts of the Bible, allows us to trace how the canon of sacred books was formed. Greek manuscripts containing the works of classical authors show how the Christian Church preserved the heritage of antiquity. The monks who copied Homer and Sophocles, Plato and Aristotle, may not always have understood the significance of their work. But thanks to them, the works that formed the basis of European culture have survived. Myths about the Vatican's secret treasures, the chronovisor, the menorah, the Holy Grail, reflect the human need for a miracle. But the real miracle of the archive is not in the mythical artifacts, but in what is actually stored here, the unbroken chain of human memory. The daily life of the archive is indeed ordinary, transparent, and normal, as its staff claim. There are no secret rituals, mystical ceremonies, supernatural phenomena. There is the painstaking work of archivists, the patient research of scientists, the slow discovery of truth. But this ordinariness has its own poetry. A scholar, leaning over an ancient document, continues the dialogue that began centuries ago. An archivist, carefully turning over dilapidated pages, continues the work of those who created these documents. The student taking notes in the reading room becomes part of a long chain of knowledge transmission. Theories that the entire early history of Christianity is a fiction, that the Vatican is hiding the true history of the Church, reflect a distrust of the official versions. This distrust is understandable. History was often written by the victors, and many documents were indeed destroyed or distorted. But the openness of the modern Vatican archives is an answer to these doubts. The invitation to researchers from all countries and denominations to study the documents, the publication of research results, the willingness to revise established assessments. All of this shows that truth is more important than propaganda. Of course, full openness is not yet in place. The documents of the pontificates of the last 6 popes remain inaccessible. But this limitation is understandable. Many of the people mentioned in these documents are still alive. Many processes have not yet been completed. Time is the best censor. It allows us to separate the important from the secondary, the essential from the accidental. In the 16th century, when the reformers were burning Catholic archives, the Vatican decided to reserve the documents. It was a wise decision based on an understanding of the value of historical memory. Today, the Church reaps the benefits of this foresight. Its archives have become a source of knowledge for the whole world. Allegations that the Vatican is hiding compromising documents may have had a basis in the past. But the current policy of openness shows that the Church is ready to learn from its mistakes, ready to subject its history to scholarly analysis. The Vatican Archives is not just a repository of documents. It is a symbol of human memory, a place where the past meets the present. Here, every document is a voice from the past, every page a window into another era. 1,300 scientists come here every year from 60 countries around the world. Everyone is looking for answers to their own questions. Everyone is trying to understand something important about the human past. In this diversity of research interests, the universal value of the archive is evident. There is no room for national, religious, or ideological prejudices. Catholic and Protestant, Christian and Muslim, believer and atheist, all are equal in the face of history. The only requirement is seriousness of intent, a willingness to work hard, and respect for the truth. 800 years of uninterrupted history. Try to imagine this period of time. Over these centuries, dozens of generations have changed. States have appeared and disappeared. Revolutions and wars have taken place. Mankind has traveled from the Middle Ages to the present. And all this time, the archive has been growing, accumulating documents, preserving memory. Each generation added its own documents, its own testimonies, its own questions to history. And each generation of researchers found in the archive answers to the questions of their time. History is not dead. It lives and develops with us. The secret of the Vatican archives is not what it hides, but what it reveals. Not in the secrets it keeps, but in the truths it helps to find. Its true treasures are not mythical artifacts, but real documents, real testimonies of real people. And that is its greatness. In a world where information is becoming increasingly ephemeral, where digital data can disappear at a moment's notice, the Vatican archives remains a reliable guardian of human memory. Its documents have survived wars and disasters, revolutions and reformation. They will survive us as well, continuing to serve future generations of researchers. When I think of the Vatican archives, I imagine a vast library of the human soul. It is not just documents, but the imprints of human lives, the traces of human thoughts and feelings. Each page holds a piece of someone's fate. Each document is a bridge between the past and the future. And in this sense, the Vatican archive belongs not only to the Church, not only to Rome, not only to Italy. It belongs to all humanity, because it holds the memory of all humanity. It is our common heritage, our common responsibility. Perhaps this is why the openness of the archive, its accessibility to researchers from all over the world, is so important. Memory cannot be the monopoly of one organization, one country, one culture. It must belong to everyone who is ready to study, understand, and preserve it in our fast-changing world, where the old is quickly forgotten for the sake of the new, where tradition is destroyed in the name of progress. The Vatican archives reminds us of the value of historical memory. It shows that the past is not dead, that it can help us understand the present and prepare for the future. 85 kilometers of shelving, 4,700 research tools, 40 million pages to be digitized. These numbers are impressive, but behind them lies something more, a commitment to preserving and passing on the human wisdom accumulated over the centuries. And when the last researcher leaves the reading room, when the lights go out in the archive halls, the documents will continue to wait, waiting for a new day, new questions, new discoveries. Because history never ends, it only continues. And the Vatican archives is the place where the past, present, and future meet in an eternal dialogue between the human soul and itself. Our night journey through the halls of human memory is coming to an end. Outside the window, there is a deep silence, and it seems that time has slowed down, allowing us to feel this amazing connection with those who lived long before us. In these late hours, when the world is falling asleep, the fragility and yet indestructibility of human memory is particularly acute. When we close our eyes, we take with us images of ancient manuscripts, candlelit scriptoria, the voices of long-silenced diplomats, the whispers of monks over parchment scrolls. All these lives, all these destinies, live on in the documents of the Vatican archives. And today, we have touched this great mystery of human immortality. Immortality through memory, through the word, through the unbroken thread of the transmission of experience from one generation to the next. Sleep is also a kind of archive, a place where our soul stores the impressions of the day, intertwines them with ancient images, creates new meanings from old memories. And let this night your dreams become a continuation of our journey through the corridors of time. And may you dream of a silent hall with high vaults, where time flows slowly and solemnly. May you dream of ancient manuscripts, which themselves open their pages and whisper forgotten stories. May you dream that you will meet a monk of the 15th century, bent over a parchment by candlelight, and he will smile at you across the abyss of centuries, recognizing in you a kindred soul, the same thirst for knowledge and understanding. And may you, when you wake up in the morning, keep this feeling in your heart, that human memory is immortal, that each of us is the keeper of the great library of mankind, and that our thoughts, our words, our actions will also one day become history for those who will come after us. Good night.